So the guy that he's talking to is the guy in charge of the underworld.
Yes.
And he just somehow killed him.
Yes.
And brought him back to life.
Yes, and he's still there. And somehow the story is gonna come.
Did he not just take his position at that point?
And somehow the story.
And he Unorthodox reactions, unorthodox.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are back again with another
unorthodox reactions.
This time we are actually forget that. My item of the day.
Oversimplified.
No, this is my item of the day. Look,
miscellaneous mythology.
This is actually a Scotch whiskey bottle case. And
Mwindo.
Actually, the reason why I took this from where I used to work is because it looks really nice. It's very classy, isn't it? It's like a.
It looks like a scroll.
Yeah, but it's where they keep alcohol. Yeah, I get it.
Something like you like. It looks. Oh, it looks like one of those letter things. You know that you put letters
and then you pull it out, and then you like do that, and you go on today's nose.
Harry.
But it's not. It's some of you alcoholics may know the alcohol brand. Some of you Americans may not. Sadly, we don't care. On to the video. Don't make an effort to bring an item of the day.
We already know that written stories are a relatively modern invention. Before that, people told stories by...
You're just not as invested as I am.
You probably already know that written stories are a relatively modern invention. Before that, people told stories by... well, telling them. Epics like the Iliad were initially passed down through oral tradition, only being codified into text relatively late in the process. Before that, they were told and retold and memorized and performed by storytellers. Now, this isn't surprising, because writing as a rule develops after language. And even if you have a writing system, you might not want to reduce your complex multimedia performance down to a simple written telling. Words on paper are very useful, but they only become entertaining when the reader essentially imagines a performance out of the text. All in all, it's fairly reasonable to assume that a lot of old stories mostly persisted through the spoken word rather than having been written down. So let's talk about Africa for a minute. This might surprise some of you, but there are a number of epics from Africa that have persisted in oral tradition for centuries and have only been written out in the last few decades, like the epics of Sunjata and Mwindo. For the most part, they've been transcribed by enterprising anthropologists making an effort to preserve the stories in a way that feels tangible to our book-loving society. There's very little written history or literature from pre-colonial Africa, although there are a truly staggering number of stories and storytellers, including entire social castes of storytellers, especially in West Africa. The effort to transcribe their stories and histories and bring them out of oral tradition and into literature is surprisingly recent, and a lot of that is honestly just because Europe didn't initially go to Africa for the culture. The lack of written history and storytelling, as well as a general lack of other such story-preserving aids in sub-Saharan Africa, like statues or friezes, led the colonizing powers to think that Africa just didn't have a history or much in the way of stories, or at least none worth recording. And because they didn't really have a vested interest in being proven wrong, they didn't really pursue this line of cultural examination further. But you'll be happy to know that this is no longer the case. Anthropology and archaeology just needed a few decades to develop new techniques that didn't draw from a written or tangible history and instead focused on oral history. And as a result, we've started getting a lot more insight into the history and the storytelling of Africa. So without further ado, let's take a look at a Nyanga epic from the Congo Great Lakes region, codified in 1956 by Daniel Bibuk from a performance by the storyteller Sheikh Harisi Rureke. It's time to talk about the epic of Mwindo. So Mwindo's story begins with his father, Mwindo, a name which literally means Mwindo's father, who is a big fancy chief of the village of Tubondo and has 7 wives and wants 7 daughters. He's absolutely adamant about wanting daughters for one reason only: bride wealth payments. See, if you have a son and he wants to marry a girl, you have to pay the girl's family bride wealth
only wants daughters.
Their daughter. But if you have a daughter, or better yet, several daughters, those bride wealth payments from aspiring suitors can make you
stupid rich.
Quickest way to TikTok, quickest way to make him to be a millionaire.
Literally. Quick. Oh my, do you know how quickly?
Marry a bunch of wives.
How many kids would I have?
Make sure they all have girls.
What? Are you dumb? Any guy, any male I have is getting...
Oh, I mean, to be fair, you probably get away with it.
Exactly. It's getting
stupid rich. Mwindo holds the attitude that because nobody pays to marry sons around here, only daughters will make him rich, and sons will be financial liabilities. So if any of his wives have sons, he'll murder them and try again. So he knocks up his wives, and soon enough, 6 of them have their daughters, just as planned. But his 7th and favorite wife just stays pregnant, which bums her out for a variety of reasons, not least of which being it's hard for her to take care of herself while super pregnant. However, her unborn kid, that's Mwindo.
The kid's like, hey, bro, listen, I can't come out.
Yeah,
I'm not coming out. If I come out, I know I'm dead.
8 years. Like, nah, man, I'm good. Kids just reaching out for food at this point. Like, thank you.
unsurprisingly, decides to make things easier on his mother by magically doing her chores while he bides his time in preparation to make his grand entrance. Classy. So Mwindo follows up his unorthodox prenatal existence by entering the world in a similarly unorthodox fashion, either emerging from his mother's middle finger or her navel. Sources disagree. Also, like many other epic heroes, he's not only born walking and talking, but also equipped with a fancy magical tool. In this case, a magical fly swatter.
He better be walking and talking about how long it took him.
Epithet is the one born walking and talking, and a big deal is made of how competent he was at birth. So Mwindo busts in, and upon seeing his manly progeny, immediately whips out his spear and chucks it at baby Mwindo, who stops it with his fly swatter and snaps it in half. Upon seeing that stabbing is ineffectual, Mwindo orders his counselors to bury the baby alive instead. Satisfied, Mwindo goes to bed, at which point he wakes up to the sound of Mwindo singing about how great he is, having dug himself out of his grave and gone back to his mother. So Mwindo reasons that stabbing and burying alive may not have worked, but maybe sealing him in a drum and dumping him in the river will. Now this doesn't kill Mwindo, but it does.
I mean, I feel like his whole reasoning for not wanting a boy is that he's a liability. And he's clearly proven himself to be capable, so does he really still need to murder him?
This alone would make you rich.
Like, all he needs to do is just say, listen, if you get married, I'm not paying for it. You're going to have to find a way to get the money yourself.
Plus the kids got
Mwindo's hair for a while.
magician.
As Mwindo floats down the river, he ends up being picked up by his aunt Iangura, who takes him in and raises him to young adulthood. Mwindo's grateful to his aunt for raising him, but he has unfinished business with his father and tells her he's going to go back to Tabondo and fight Mwindo. Iangura understands, but is rather concerned for Mwindo's well-being, so she has her brothers-in-law forge Mwindo, which either means that they make him armor, or that they take him apart, forge his body like metal, and then put him back together, now as an indestructible badass with a body like iron. The specifics vary from telling to telling. So Mwindo's raring to go, but his aunts and uncles warned him that Tabondo is huge and Mwindo has many men to fight for him, so he should let them come along and help him. So Mwindo and his entourage head towards Tabondo, stopping along the way to make camp. When Iangura mentions that they have no food, Mwindo does his magic thing, waves his fly swatter, and summons all the food from Tabondo to fly over and help him out. So before Mwindo goes to fight, his uncles insist that he lets them go first. This is a bad call, as they are horrendously outnumbered.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what were they thinking?
This and storms Tabondo himself, terrifying the men. They are horrendously outnumbered.
Oh, I guess he needed that here. What is it called? The tragic backstory of the hero.
I lost all the people I came with.
Revenge.
All the ones that loved me.
Mwindo is enraged by this and storms Tabondo himself, terrifying the men of the village with his indestructibility. Mwindo freaks out and runs away, just in time to avoid being toasty fried by the lightning Mwindo calls down with his fly swatter to kill everyone in Tabondo. So Mwindo is victorious with his father on the run, but Iangura is sad to see everyone dead. So Mwindo goes around with his fly swatter and swats his uncles in the face to wake them up, which works, so that's cool. But Mwindo
he can bring
a hawk
people back from the dead.
Ran away down a hole and is now in the underworld, the land of the gods, and is meeting with Mwisa, ruler of the dead. Iangura warns him that only the dead belong in the underworld and no one ever leaves, but Mwindo sings that song about how great he is again and dives on in. So Mwindo lands in the underworld and heads over to the well, where he encounters Kahindo, Mwisa's daughter. Kahindo knows all about Mwindo and warns him that her father will try and trick him into drinking his beer and eating his porridge. He has to politely refuse or he'll be trapped in the underworld, very classic. So Mwindo goes to meet with Mwisa, who again tells him that nobody ever leaves the underworld. Mwindo's not too worried and turns down the offer of food, at which point Mwisa says he'll allow him to leave with Mwindo if Mwindo accomplishes a couple tasks for him. Task number 1 is to raise a banana grove to maturity over the course of a single day. Mwisa gives him tools and seeds to work with, at which point Mwindo animates them with his fly swatter and lets the grove plant and tend itself while he takes a nice nap. He starts collecting his fully grown bananas, but Mwisa is upset that he's actually doing the task and decides to sabotage him. Mwisa takes off his cowrie shell belt and sends it to attack Mwindo, whereupon it constricts around him and suffocates him to death. Fortunately, Mwindo's magic fly swatter animates itself and brings him back to life, and Mwindo sends the fly swatter to do Mwisa the same courtesy the god did him. Then he finishes collecting his bananas and heads back to the village, subsequently using his fly swatter to resurrect Mwisa from the whole reciprocal murder thing and hands over his bananas. So Mwisa gives him another task, to gather honey from a certain tree.
This is crazy.
So wait,
can you not interrupt the
no, because I need to say something.
Can you not do that to me? I'm invested in this story.
So the guy that he's talking to is the guy in charge of the underworld.
Yes.
And he just somehow killed him.
Yes.
And brought him back to life.
Yes. And he's still there. And somehow the story is going to come.
Did he not just take his position at that point?
And somehow the story.
And he died and brought himself back to life in the underworld.
That's crazy. That's
why is he not in charge?
What do you mean? Why? He's
the underworld.
Mwindo climbs the tree and smokes out the bees, but he can't quite reach the honey, and while he's going for it, Mwisa sends his belt to strangle him again. That goes about as well as it did before, and Mwindo is thoroughly sick of the task, so he cuts to the chase and calls down more lightning to split the tree in half, at which point he gets the honey. So Mwindo returns to Mwisa and hands over the honey, then demands his father. Unfortunately, it would appear that Mwisa warned Mwindo of Mwindo's presence, and Mwindo seems to have run away. Mwisa refuses to help, so Mwindo temporarily kills him again and runs after Mwindo, who is hiding in a cave with Ntumba, who I'm pretty sure is a god of aardvarks? It's a little unclear. Mwindo then then seeks refuge in a village belonging to this guy Shibarungu, who challenges Mwindo to a gambling game. Mwindo wagers and loses everything but his magic fly swatter, and then wagers that too. Fortunately, the universe appears unwilling to separate Mwindo and his fly swatter, so he immediately wins everything back.
That's incredibly risky.
Why?
Now, interestingly enough, Mwindo and Mwindo are very respectful and chill with one another. Finding Mwindo has left Mwindo in a very good mood, and he shows him off to everyone who tripped him up along his journey, while also fixing all the damage he did to them and their stuff. Mwisa, who is no longer dead, offers Mwindo his daughter Kahindo's hand in marriage, but Mwindo says he'll only get married in his home village of Tabondo. So Mwindo brings Mwindo home, resurrects everyone else in the village from that one time he murdered everyone, and berates Mwindo for being a bad father. He calls a big village meeting and basically puts his father on trial for treating him so badly without any reason, and Mwindo admits that what he did to Mwindo and his mother was wrong. He abdicates his role as king and names Mwindo as his successor. Mwindo is sort of honorably exiled to live in another location, and Mwindo gets gifted 4 wives by his father, uncles, aunts, and the neighboring pygmies.
What you say?
Right.
He gets gifted 4 wives by his father, uncles, aunts, and the neighboring pygmies.
First of all, where are they finding these wives and what kind of connections do they have to him? Because I don't trust them back then. Like, I feel like they're probably like his second cousins. So.
Hey, that's his sister, mate.
Okay. Quick PSA. Pygmy is considered offensive, but unfortunately, there's no PC term to replace it, and the story translation I used didn't identify the specific ethnic group by any more exact term, so this is the only descriptor I have available. Geographically, the exact group would probably be either the Congo, FA, or Asua. Sorry, D. Or is it just sorry with a smiley face?
Probably.
Or like a sad face.
Life is good. A few days of being king later, Mwindo has a craving for pork and sends off a few hunters to get him a boar. Unfortunately, they accidentally disturb the dragon Kirimu, who eats all the hunters but one. A man named Kurongo, who runs back to Mwindo to warn him about the dragon. Mwindo hasn't left for his exile yet, so he's there to warn Mwindo not to fight Kirimu because he's a famously dangerous monster who will bring devastation to their kingdom. Mwindo obviously doesn't care and tracks down Kirimu, takes him by surprise, and kills him with his fly swatter. Then has him carried back to the village so they can retrieve the 3 hunters from Kirimu's stomach. Unfortunately for everyone involved, the lightning god Nkuba, who's so far spent most of this story chucking lightning at stuff Mwindo wants lightning chucked at, is in fact blood brothers with Kirimu, and when he sees his dragon buddy dead, he's very distressed. Now, because Mwindo didn't know Kirimu was a friend of his, Nkuba is not as mad as he could have been, but he still tells Mwindo that he needs to learn to have a little chill sometimes, and carries him up into the sky so he can spend a year seeing things from a larger perspective. The various sky gods tell Mwindo that, yeah, he may be cool, but his heroism and his power don't mean anything in the face of something like, say, the sun. They're all very upfront about how much they respect him, because otherwise he'd be super dead right now, but they make him swear an oath to not kill anything ever again, or else Nkuba will pull him into the sky again, this time.
I mean, that kind of sounds like a recipe for disaster for him.
Yeah, that's
why if someone attack, because he's the future king of a country. He's gonna have to kill someone eventually.
He just knocks them out.
And then what? When they wake up,
coma.
Okay, because he can just physically put them into a coma.
Hey, he can bring people back to life. What are you talking about?
The rest of his days. The story, interestingly enough, wraps up with 4 explicit morals. Moral number 1: there's no such thing as a bad child, and no child deserves to be rejected by their family, regardless of disability or gender. They were born that way. It was God's decision. Deal with it. Moral number 2: heroism is great.
Right, I didn't hear the full thing.
No such thing as a bad child, and no child deserves to be rejected by their family, regardless of disability or gender. They were born that way. It was God.
I agree with the second part. The first part, however, I have to disagree with.
What do you mean?
Bad childs do exist.
God's decision, deal with it. Moral number 2: heroism is great, but callousness brings disaster. Don't do it. Moral number 3: help each other. Kinship is the only thing keeping our species alive. Moral number 4: there's always a bigger fish. Doesn't matter how badass you are, eventually you're gonna find someone who can beat you into the ground. I'm pretty sure this is the only hero story I know about where the hero actually learns a modicum of humility in the end.
Facts.
It's not time.
I was gonna say it was kind of reminding me of like Hercules, like towards the beginning there, but then he just kind of started
going down, and being a lot more humble.
You think a story about a 7-headed dragon, daddy issues, and a journey through hell would at least have a made-for-TV movie by now.
Take it easy.
Yeah. Fun fact: trying to find visual reference for this was a nightmare. A colorful, interesting nightmare.
So much you have to know.
I had the same problem with the Pele video. Searching for stuff like traditional region clothing turned up a million white ladies and their costume inspiration boards. With no sources, obviously, because Pinterest is awful. Yeah, I can agree with that. Surprisingly, the Seattle Children's Theatre production of Mwindo was one of the most useful unofficial sources for character design.
I think you can make it. Try not to pause it.
Mostly because it was the only one I could find. I made it. My favorite part of this story is the bit where Mwindo's default problem-solving methods were straight up murdering the person and resurrecting them again later. I mean, if you can pull it off, why not, right? Oh my god, Carl. And thank you, oh, blah, blah, patrons. There you go. Alright. There you go.
You did well. You did really well, actually.
Anyway, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed that. As usual, we really enjoyed that. That was really fun.
A really good video. Thank you for checking in with us. We've been on Unorthodox Reactions. If you're still here with us, we appreciate you. Yes. If you left early, you know what to do. Not big.
Least you can do is leave a like.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh yeah, like, comment, subscribe. We know we don't do it early enough, but you should do that. And look after your loved one.
Comment reaction suggestions below, and we shall see you in the next one in a bit.
Peace.